Let's start where everything shifted. The year was 2014, and EXO wasn't just a group anymore. They were a phenomenon riding the dizzying high of Growl. But SM Entertainment's ambitious cinematic universe, this story of powers and parallel worlds, was about to collide with a harsh, unscripted reality in a way no one could have predicted. The concept had always walked a fine line between genius and exploitation, blurring the story with the artists' real lives. But in May 2014, that line vanished. The release of Overdose was a dark, claustrophobic masterpiece, showing the members trapped in an endless hexagonal maze, psychologically tormented and separated. The symbolism was heavy. They were addicted to escape, lost in a system. And then, in a twist that felt ripped from their own storyline, Kris, one of the central figures of the EXO-M subunit, filed a lawsuit against SM Entertainment to terminate his contract. The timing was surreal. Here was a video about being trapped, and a key member was fighting in court to break free. The fandom EXO-L was thrown into chaos. Was this a coincidence, or was the lore mirroring a grim behind-the-scenes truth? Rumors began to swirl about the intense pressures, the rigid control, the very maze of trainee debt and restrictive contracts that SM was known for. The Red Force, this fictional corrupting entity, suddenly had a very real-world analog in the eyes of many fans, the industry system itself. The fracture had only just begun. Just months later, in October 2014, Luhan followed suit, filing his own lawsuit. The lore's prophecy from their debut Mama video echoed ominously. Careless tribes divided the lands. The two forces from the Chinese subunit were gone. The narrative of two parallel worlds, EXO-K and EXO-M, was crumbling in real time. Online forums and social media exploded with speculation. Were the grueling promotions, the constant travel between Korea and China, and the pressure of this elaborate dual-world concept contributing to their exit? Industry insiders whispered about the unique difficulties faced by the Chinese members, from political tensions to immense home country pressures. SM Entertainment remained stoic, pushing the storyline forward, but the foundation was cracking. The departure of Tao in 2015 only cemented the crisis. The 12 forces were now 9, and SM faced a monumental challenge: how to sustain a mythology built on that specific number. Fans were heartbroken and angry, accusing the company of prioritizing a convoluted story over the well-being of the idols themselves. The controversy was no longer just about contract law. It was about the ethics of world building when the human elements within that world were breaking down. In response, SM doubled down in the most audacious way possible with the 2015 Pathcode comeback. It was a marketing masterstroke, an ARG, alternate reality game, that had fans decoding clues across global cities. But analytically, it was also a stark, almost cynical adaptation of the crisis. The storyline became about the members as sleeper agents, their powers reawakening as they were hunted. The hinted message was that the lost members were simply off the grid, their signals gone dark. The album title, Exodus, was painfully on the nose, referencing a mass departure. For some fans, this was brilliant, mythologizing real-life turmoil into art. For others, it felt like SM was gaslighting the fandom, weaving a narrative to cover up a corporate and personal disaster, refusing to acknowledge the real human cost behind the sci-fi plot. The lore became a Rorschach-esque. Was it a coping mechanism or a manipulation? The controversies evolved beyond departures. As the lore deepened with 2016's Monster and Lucky One, the themes grew darker: kidnapping, experimentation, psychological torture. The members were depicted with prisoner numbers being injected and fighting guards. While visually stunning, it sparked uncomfortable debates. Were these violent, oppressive narratives appropriate, especially for a group with a very young fan base? Furthermore, the 2017 Power video, which seemed to celebrate their abilities, introduced a multiverse theory that some fans interpreted as a soft reboot, a way to say that the stories with the departed members still existed in another timeline. This was seen by critics as a refusal to let go, a narrative hoarding that prevented the group from moving on cleanly. The lore was becoming so complex, so self-referential, that it created a barrier to entry for new fans, who were met with a decade's worth of interconnected videos, teasers, and tweets to understand a single comeback. It bred a kind of elitism within the fandom, where lore masters held sway and simplified interpretations were dismissed. Then came 2019's Obsession, the zenith of narrative darkness and a fresh wave of controversy. The concept of XXO, dark clones of the members, was groundbreaking, but it also raised unsettling questions about identity and consent. Here were idols portraying corrupted, violent versions of themselves. The choreography involved self-strangulation and aggressive mirroring. In an industry where image is meticulously controlled, this was a radical, risky move. While praised for its artistry, it also disturbed viewers. Was this exploring inner darkness, or was it glorifying self-harm and duality in a potentially harmful way. The debate raged online. Simultaneously, the real-world timeline created another friction point. The elaborate obsession promotions were cut short as members began entering their mandatory military enlistments. The grand apocalyptic battle against EXO was left on a cliffhanger, with the storyline going completely dormant for years. This hiatus fueled criticism that SM had written a check the lore couldn't cash. They had built an epic serialized saga, but failed to maintain its continuity due to the unavoidable realities of the Korean entertainment system. The silence that followed from 2019 to 2025 became a controversy in itself, with only the non-military digital single Don't Fight the Feeling in 2021, which pointedly ignored the lore. Many fans felt abandoned. Had SM given up on its own story? Was the decade-long build-up all for nothing? The fandom split into factions, those who cherished the lore as a discontinued masterpiece, and those who felt it was a promise broken, a narrative burden that ultimately distracted from the music. This period highlighted the core risk of such an ambitious project. In K-pop, where group stability is perpetually vulnerable to military service, solo careers, and contract renewals, a long-form story is a dangerous gamble. Now, in 2025, the announcement of Reverx has reignited all these old debates with a vengeance. The return of the hexagons and eclipse imagery has lore fans in a frenzy, but the context is utterly different. The group is now a steady state of 6 actively promoting members. The key question fueling current controversy is, how will SM retcon a universe built for 12? Will they acknowledge the missing forces or simply reboot? Early teasers for I'm Home are being microscopically analyzed. Is Home a return to the exoplanet, a final acceptance of their reduced numbers? Or is it a cynical nostalgia play, mining past symbolism to evoke emotion without the commitment to finish the old story? The industry insight here is crucial. K-pop is in an era of cinematic universes, from BTS to aespa, but EXO's lore is the original blueprint and its cautionary tale. It shows the immense power of a deep narrative to create fan loyalty, but also the devastating whiplash when real-life idol instability, lawsuits, enlistments, burnout shatters the fictional plot. The ultimate controversy of EXO's lore isn't about one scandal, it's about the entire experiment. It makes us ask, was this a visionary piece of transmedia storytelling that elevated K-pop, or was it at times a manipulative meta-narrative used to deflect from internal turmoil and keep fans engaged through crisis? As we await the full Reverx album, we're not just waiting for new music, we're waiting for the answer to whether a story that began with 12 forces, 2 worlds, and 1 prophecy can find a meaningful ending with 6, and whether the fandom, after all this drama, will ever see it as an ending they can accept.